Welcome to Inspired Living with Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. Every Wednesday, Marc, along with his special guests, will explore thought-provoking topics and ideas that promote creativity, self-help, healing, happiness, and well-being to inspire you on your spiritual journey. Each week, Marc will discuss different paths to achieving a more spiritual, balanced, happy, and healthy lifestyle. Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual. Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. Marc is a tested, certified, and professional spiritual medium, metaphysical teacher, healer, and spiritual advisor with a spiritual practice based in Seattle, Washington. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be in this beautiful, transformative, healing planet of ours. This is Inspired Living Radio. Welcome to another live broadcast here on the OMTimes Radio Network. I am your host, Marc Lainhart, Prospector, coming to you live from my studio here in the beautiful Pacific Northwest of Seattle, Washington. Thank you for tuning in and taking today's time to have a inspiring, encouraging, motivational conversation about emerging from this pandemic. I think we get a breath and just let go the last 15, 16 months of, everything we've gone through, from this pandemic to politics to divide to uncertainty to fear. I always like to say fear is false evidence appearing real. And we're getting to the point now with today's show that we're starting to emerge from this global pandemic, which unfortunately to date has taken here in the United States 600,000 plus souls that have transferred over into heaven, the afterlife, Summerland, whatever your belief system may be. But that's still 600,000 people here in the United States, and those that have been impacted from those 600,000 and the ripple effect that goes out into your communities, into your family, to your colleagues, to your friends. I can tell you personally, COVID has hit me professionally. It's hit me personally very close to home with family members. Some very scary times, almost losing a family member really close, like literally having the FaceTime call and saying, you can either take this, antibiotic shot and remdesivir and the vaccinations that you've already received, or you're going to go on a ventilator and most likely, pass into spirit. So I can speak from firsthand experience of how this pandemic has come to my front door. And I can tell you that, the sadness, the trauma, the tragedy, the grieving that's taken place with all this will happen for years after. Even some of the readings I've done lately, I've had to, make a reunion as a medium to say goodbye to a family member, a few family members that had to come back to say goodbye because they didn't get that opportunity when they were in the hospital because of COVID. But as we start to emerge, I'd said back in my prediction show back in early January of 2021, I said by May and June, if we believed in science, we believed in vaccinations, that we would start to round the corner. And here we are in the middle of June. Happy June to you. We're just right before the summer solstice is about to open. And we are emerging. We are, getting back to whatever this new normal is going to be. And we'll talk about that in this episode, because the normal that you once knew going to be the normal that you had in your past. It's changed. And we know this because pandemics from history past have changed society. It's changed people. It's changed behaviors. It's changed beliefs. Something that we need to start looking at for our roaring 20s. But I said by May and June that we would start to round the corner. I'm here in Seattle. I can officially say that Seattle to close down back on March 12th, I believe, because I just come back from Vegas, and literally the day before, just gotten back from a trip, and everything shut down. And we were one of the first cities to shut down because we believed in science, we believed in mitigation, and didn't get caught up in the, all the misinformation, the propaganda, everything you see on social media, the conspiracy theories. We followed the data, we followed the science, and I can tell you today, 16 months later, a year and a half later, I guess, is Seattle now has fully opened. 70% of the population here has been vaccinated. We're getting back to this new normal where we don't even need to social distance. I would still recommend social distancing, wash your hands, but we don't have to wear masks. And that's a big thing because, again, science matters. And I always remind my listeners that the only thing that improves science is better science, not somebody's opinion, not something you see on YouTube, but science is always improving. Science is always learning. There's a lot we still don't know about this virus and this COVID, but we also know that this virus does not have a cure. And so the best way to navigate something that doesn't have a cure is to follow the science and to look at vaccinations and to do your research and, assume that you may be positive and get the vaccination so you don't transmit that to somebody else. That's how I look at public health. I don't know how politics seeped its way into public health because public health impacts everybody. It impacts the globe. It impacts us as a community. Unfortunately, politics did slip into this, and you can see it today. Even with even certain states, you can look at the data on who's vaccinated, who's not vaccinated, who refused to wear a mask, and social distance. But I can tell you, Seattle is 70%. We are opening back up. I know California just opened back up. A lot of the northeastern states are starting to open back up. But like I said, unfortunately, you can look at these. If you want to look at blue versus red states, you can see a lot of the blue. And a lot of the red states have low vaccination rates, and there's still a variance of that Delta COVID out there that is still, it caused a lot of pain. So it's been a learning lesson for me to observe with certain, friends, family, colleagues, and how we can have different perspectives. But for today, show as caterpillar emerges from a great struggle in the cocoon, which we've all gone through together, financially, emotionally, physically, psychologically, we start to emerge as the butterfly. And the butterfly is something that is, in my opinion, more beautiful than the caterpillar, but it gives a different perspective. As a caterpillar, you're at this lower, perspective closer to the ground. As you emerge as the butterfly, you have this perspective of seeing things from a bigger, high 30,000 foot view, if you will. And as we emerge from this pandemic, talking for almost 2 seasons now about what I see of other, and the great coming together is something that's going to, trigger or catalyst to bring us as a society together and to put our differences aside. Because the one thing I've learned through all this is we can have different opinions, we can have different perspectives, but at the end of the day, we all live on one planet. We all breathe the same air. We all need water, and we need to come together to find common ground. And that, we have a lot more in common, and we don't have to let the little differences divide us and move into hate and move into unkindness and move into cruelty and move into, pain. And I've experienced that a lot this last year in watching through social media, through just, news releases and people, freaking out on planes and out in society and the mass shootings that are taking place. I think and I believe that we are better than that. And I believe that as butterflies, we see each other and realize that we can agree to disagree, but we don't need to hate and hurt and kill one another to have these disagreements. It's you can see it from the highest levels, from politics all the way down to local government, even within your job space or even within your families. I'm sure that you've seen these differences. And I'm a firm believer that we come to consciousness through pain, as Carl Jung talked about, that we come to consciousness through great pain and suffering. But as we emerge from this pandemic, and we are emerging as butterflies, I believe that we're going to get to a higher perspective and a greater appreciation for the life that we once maybe took for granted in our normal ways, that we can now start to create this new norm. So, I'm going to really get to the basics from a psychology standpoint of what Abraham Maslow talked about, which, he claims as humans, it's called the basic psychological needs. And this is, things such as food, drink, shelter, safety needs. And these are usually achieved through, financial and emotional security. And we've seen that not just with the pandemic and the politics, but equality, racial injustices, racism. We've seen it, from systemic racism, things that we're learning from our history. And if one thing that I love about history as a student of history is you can go back and look at these pandemics and see how pandemics have changed businesses, people, philosophies, habits, belief systems. The list goes on and on and on. And we're going to get ready for our first break here in just a few minutes. And we'll get into more of what Maslow talked about, but it's the basic psychological needs. And we know that there are people out there, as we watch people continue to get rich, millionaires, billionaires, and we're going to see our first trillionaire. I'm not sure if it's going to be the guy from France or if it's Musk or Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon here in Seattle. It's going to be one of those three. Elon Musk is doing the SpaceX, space exploration, space capitalization is what I call it, as we start to move into space. But you cannot continue to have millionaires, billionaires, and trillionaires continue to make lots and lots of money, pay no taxes, yet have an entire workforce that can't even make us a wage to put food on their table for their families or have a roof over their heads. And that includes our veterans. Some of our veteran families, I pay attention to the VA and what we're doing for our veterans. Some of these veteran families could use a nice, pay increase for our service members and give them a nice bump in what we're doing. Because as the richer get richer and the poorer get poorer, if you learn from history, you know that is a recipe for disaster. That's how revolutions start. That's how rebellions start. That's how civil wars start, is based on, for our first civil war, it was based on, racism and slavery, and our first rebellion was based on not being representative, representation through taxes, so taxation without representation. So capitalism, in my opinion, over this next decade of what I've been calling our roaring 20s, is going to shift. It's going to happen. We start talking about universal health care, start talking about universal income, wages. As artificial intelligence continues to ramp up and take more jobs away, we're going to have to look really at each other as a species, as a society, as a globe, and how we interact with our planet, and as we start to leave our planet. So, I always like to say, now more than ever, we must stand up. We must demand equality. We must honor our differences, defend the Constitution and democracy. That's a whole nother conversation. We need to trust women. We need to pay attention. We need to read real news, not fake news. We need to believe in science. You need to speak out. And when you speak out, you can always do that with the words of being kind, caring, and compassion. They always say that, honey attracts more flies and bees than vinegar does. So your words, you can still speak up and speak out, but also by speaking out, listen to others. Have that perspective. That's why we have two ears and one mouth, and we need to learn to listen to each other, and we need to learn to see each other. But, be generous. Help those in need. Choose love. Be the change. And if you be the change, that's a ripple effect that starts with you, that carries out through our families, our friends, our community, and eventually around the globe. And this pandemic has taught me a lot, just observing others. It's been very devastating for sure. But again, there's positivity here, guys. I'm here to inspire you. I always say, be inspired, inspire others, inspire before we expire. And that's what I'm doing. I'm inspiring before I expire to let you know that this pandemic is going to open up. The coronavirus will be with us until we actually have a cure, just like AIDS. AIDS has been around since the 80s. There's no cure for AIDS. And you may not know this, but a lot of our viruses that are out there, a lot of them don't have cures. It's about how you navigate and how flexible you are to get around certain situations in life, certain crises. It goes back to what Darwin talked about. It's not the strongest that survive. It's not the smartest that survive. It's those that are the most flexible that survive. And if anything, that's what COVID, this global pandemic, has taught us, is how to be flexible, how to isolate, how to stay home, how to work from home. Again, that's going to be a huge transition of just the worker going in traffic, 9-to-5 job in a brick and mortar building, when you can do the work from home, which also starts to meet different needs. And we'll talk about that when we come back from our first break. But it's been quite a journey to watch the last 18 months, 16 months as it started to take off. Because it literally did start January. I had heard about this in January. In fact, I take that back. I heard about COVID coming out of China the day after Christmas, which would have been 2019. We're in 2021, right? 2020? Yeah. So it'd be 2019. So that would be December of 2019 is when I first heard about what was coming out of China. And this is actually talking to an international couple when we were down in Cabo San Lucas that had just come back from China, telling us this in a pool as we're drinking a drink about how China was having their own version of what they were calling the Black Plague. And so I started to keep an eye on it. And at that time, it wasn't a pandemic. It was, very kind of low energy, not a lot of media around it. But, 3 months later, by March of that year, things had really taken off and we had started to shut down and to mitigate. But most viruses out there don't have a cure. It's about how flexible we are and how we can navigate getting around these viruses. And that's through believing in science, mitigation, vaccinations. I've been vaccinated. I'm fully vaccinated now. You may hear in my voice I have a little bit of cold. It's not COVID. I actually have a cold, which means tells me my system is working great. And you need to have a strong immune system. You don't need to vaccinate for everything in life, but there are certain points in history where vaccinations do help mitigate and stop the flow. And I know if COVID comes to my doorstep, I know that it's not going to be passed on to somebody else. And then I can take the sickness on, I can beat it, and go out into society and community knowing that I'm not going to expose somebody else that maybe can't defend it, and they don't have a strong enough immune system, are elderly, those that are older, or maybe out of shape or obese, because we've seen the stats and the data of how it attacks people based on their how they live their life and how older they are in life. So that's been an interesting thing as well. So we're going to go to our first break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about the shifting needs of this crisis and how that's changed culturally, how it's changed the workers, how pandemics end up in history changing us. And we'll just keep the conversation going. So thanks for joining me today. Radio. And like I like to say, you are the inspired and the inspiration. We'll be back here in just a few moments.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
Listeners, we hope you're enjoying the shows here on OMTimes Radio. Marc Lainhart here, and host of Inspired Living Radio. And I'd like to invite you to my morning show of inspiration, encouragement, healing, motivations, transformations, and discovering that diamond within. Metaphysical Mocha Mondays every Monday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, over on the Intuitive Prospector Facebook page and my YouTube channel, Soul Adventures. Dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover that diamond within.
COVID-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
Do you feel like your emotions are all over the place? That's normal during this abnormal time. There are a number of ways to cope. Maintain a healthy routine, get enough sleep, eat nutritious food, and exercise at least 30 minutes each day. Schedule some time to talk with a friend or family member. And remember, you can always take a few deep breaths to feel more centered.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
And welcome back to Inspired Living Radio. Today we are talking about moving past COVID-19 as we embrace the changes in our societal values, our human behaviors, and we're already seeing some of that underway. We find that after, we come out of this every 100 years going back to the 1600s, 1620, 1720, 1820, 1920, and of course 2020. We'll say hindsight, 2020 hindsight. We've had these pandemics that that just raged through our population, and we find as we emerge from that, whether it's one plague lasted for several years, people change from that, and we often see an acceleration or an advance or even an avalanche based on global crisis. The one that would come closest from in my lifetime would be that of 9/11, because it was such a rapid change, and the things that took place from that, from security to how we look at people, to how we looked at religions, how we looked at racism, how we looked at national security, the wars that it generated. There was a ripple effect that took place from such a, impactful, tragic event that came out of nowhere and caught us all by surprise. This COVID, I would say, is a little bit different, because to say this caught us by surprise would actually be a lie, in the fact that we've been, tracking this. You could go back 4 presidents if you want, going all the way back to Clinton, who talked about pandemics. If you're a fan or not a fan of Bill Gates, completely up to you. But we have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation here in Seattle. I don't think it's going to be the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation anymore now that they've, parted ways. But he long talked about, instead of having war games, we need to look at virus games, war games based on pandemics. And you can go, years back to the Clinton administration, where they were talking about Clinton, Bush, Obama, and then all of a sudden we get this last administration, and it's like, wait, I don't know what you're talking about. So, the information is out there. Ignorance is easy in this day and age, I've come to learn. But we know that the viruses are going to continue to come. There's not a lot of cures for these viruses. I believe maybe smallpox, maybe one other that has an actual cure for it. I know there was a cure for polio, but that too, in a sense, they learned from that. A lot of you may not know this, and I know this from working in charitable events, that our government is on record saying that they would never close down after polio, after the cure for polio. The vaccination was distributed through society. It literally shut down, from a monetary standpoint, those that were fighting and learning about polio. And the government's on record saying they would never shut down an organization like that again, because it caused such a financial ripple effect through our economy. So you can look at some of the major diseases today: cancer, leukemia, AIDS. They're not going to just shut it down, and this is all tied to money, unfortunately. But that was kind of an eye opener for me when I learned that about polio, because it was impacting, even at the time, FDR was suffering from polio, that current president of the time. But they're on record. I looked it up in the Freedom of Information Act, and they're on record, quote unquote, they would never shut down, because they literally closed down the organization supporting polio within 2 weeks, and people out of jobs, and it was quite a train wreck. But it was a good thing, right? It's kind of like the same thing with the antibiotics that we have today from Pasteur and his development of oh my goodness, what am I trying to say? Drawing a blank here. I'll come back to it. But it's in our antibiotics. I'm seeming to lose my train of thought. But he wanted to release that to everybody, and the government wanted to charge for it and not give out the oh goodness. Why can I not think of this? So Pasteur was smallpox, yes. Salk was polio. What's our antibiotics, though? I'll come back to it. I'm just, I think I need more coffee. So it happens when you're live on the air, right? But as far as what I'm getting at is, a lot of times there's stuff out there that is accessible to us, just like this vaccine. Been in development since the first SARS, the first bird flu. Over a decade ago, they've been looking at the DNA, the rMNA of this, and it's not anything new. That's how we got it out so quick, because science matters and distribution matters and transparency and communications matter. And where I'm going with this is, there's a lot of conspiracy and a lot of fear out there, but that's why this was distributed and mitigated so well, is the research that's gone into this has been years in the making, and the government didn't control it in the sense where they're going to charge people for it. It was free if you've got your vaccinations like I did. It was free because they know that the cost of this COVID shutting society down was not for any kind of gain, not for a business model. So Fleming for penicillin. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I've drawn a blank. So going back to penicillin, how they wanted to lock down penicillin, and the creator, the inventor of penicillin, didn't want that. He wanted everybody to have penicillin. And think about how penicillin and our antibiotics, it directly impacted saving one of my family members based on the antibiotics that my family member had received, and that's through the discovery and advancement of penicillin. So imagine where we would be without penicillin. So yeah, just to recap: Pasteur was smallpox, Salk was polio, Alexander Fleming was penicillin. Thank you for my resource, Chris, who was helping me out here. So where I wanted to go with this, though, is if you look at history, we know that history has changed us. We know that these pandemics throughout history have gotten us to move in a different direction. And, we can go back, once something emerges like COVID has, it rarely leaves society, whether it's bacterial, viral, parasitic. We know that COVID was transmitted based on speaking and coughing, kind of like pneumonia. I've had walking pneumonia a few times, and I usually pick that up when I would ride the public bus to my day job. So moving forward, anytime I'm on a public transit, whether it's plane or train or bus, that's something that's changed with me. I will now wear my mask. Is it uncomfortable? Yes, but I know that I'm having just that extra barrier because I know that stuff is spread through, the distribution of, speaking and coughing, and you get a lot of that on planes. And now I know that the planes have a really good filtering system, but, every disease pathogen that has affected people over the last several thousand years is still with us. It's nearly impossible to fully eradicate them. And, the only disease that I'm aware of that has been eradicated through vaccination is smallpox and, of course, polio. The mass vaccination campaigns that were, led by what we call the WHO, or the World Health Organization, which again has come under scrutiny based on political viewpoints in the 1960s and the 1970s, were successful because in 1980, smallpox was declared the first and still the only human disease to be fully eradicated by the World Health Organization. And I think because this COVID caused such chaos around the globe and shut everybody down, I think the World Health Organization is going to transform from this as well. And we've learned that, we don't need to politicize healthcare. Public healthcare is for everybody. The variants, the disease doesn't pick who you voted for. It just wants. And, I think success stories like smallpox are exceptional, but it's rather the rule that the disease come to stay. Take, for example, the pathogens like malaria. Those are transmitted via parasite, and it's almost as old as humanity and still exists as a heavy disease burden today. So malaria, I know if you've traveled internationally, a lot of times you have to receive, in order to go to certain countries, you have to receive a shot, aka a vaccination, to combat against certain diseases that are known in certain areas, like malaria. And again, malaria has been around, since as old as humanity, that we're, as far as recorded records go. And there's about 228 million cases of malaria and about 405,000 deaths worldwide. And that was back in 2018. Since 1955, global programs to eradicate malaria have assisted with the use of different vaccinations, DDT, chloroquine. So that chloroquine came up with this COVID. You may have heard chloroquine, but that's actually more for battling malaria than it would be for COVID. It really has no relevance. But again, transparency and communications and social media and news cycles really caused a lot of chaos with people. But again, it's not a pandemic; it's an endemic that still resides in many countries, preferably the global south, where the temperatures are a little bit warmer. But similar to diseases such as tuberculosis, leprosy, measles, they've been with us for several millennia as well. And despite all of our efforts, immediate eradication is still not in sight. And like I said, for me growing up in the 80s, late 70s and early 80s, AIDS was the big, I remember so many different things about you couldn't do this, or you could get, if somebody had AIDS, you could get it from the drinking water or touch. There's a lot of things that we have learned now to, understand the science of AIDS and actually have treatment for HIV to help people live a longer life. In fact, I remember when Magic Johnson, the famous LA Laker, came out and announced to the world that because he had HIV, and he's still here today. So again, the flexibility of emerging from a pandemic teaches us many things, but to look at history, but also to depend on science. It's because science is what saves us, not conspiracy theories and not, false news and false narratives. So what are some of the things that have happened since we are emerging from this COVID, this global pandemic? We've got a lot of younger pathogens here, like I said, like HIV. We've got the Ebola virus along with influenza. And now we're going to add the coronavirus into the mix, which under coronavirus, that includes SARS, MERS, SARS-CoV-2, and of course the now infamous COVID-19. But overall, the picture, the epidemiological picture becomes clear. We've discovered that research on the global burden of disease finds that annual mortality caused by infectious disease, most of which occurs in the developing world, is nearly 1/3 of all deaths globally. So we know that, globally, that most deaths, or at least 1/3 of all deaths, are going to come from some sort of pathogen, whether it's, influenza. I've had influenza type A. I actually had it a year ago before COVID hit from a workshop that we had done here, and half the class had been exposed to influenza type A. Nobody died, but a lot of us did get sick. But, if you think about that overall, it's nearly 1/3 of all deaths globally. And viruses that, we have daily, yearly flu shots, being mindful of wearing a mask. This is what's going to change with our society, is more people are going to be more aware of just how deadly virus can be, but understand that without viruses, there is no humans either. So awareness is going to change as we move into this new roaring 20s of ours. And boy, we kicked it off with a lot, didn't we? We've got pandemic, political divide, insurrections. This month we're going to have a aliens report. Whether we're alone in the universe or not, I'm not really holding my breath on that. If you listen to my past show, I talked about the pale blue dot and how humanity transforms from first contact. But I don't think the government's going to really give us what we need to know about being alone or not alone in the universe. I think it's pretty arrogant and naive to think that we're the only intelligent lives out there in a galaxy that's just, filled with billions and billions of stars. And who knows, they could even be from this planet. We don't know a lot about our ocean. So you have to check out that last episode where I went into more research and talked about the conscientious approach to that, the spiritual approach, the religious approach, and even some scripture I talked about for when it comes to aliens. But this month, we're going to be getting awareness and conversations that we may not be alone. And that's transformative as it is. But as we emerge from this pandemic, we're realizing that businesses, because this is what it's all about, right? We're the only species that pays to live here. And it's the businesses that drive a lot of what we do. It's been devastating for several businesses, namely retail, restaurants, hospitality, in-person entertainment. It's impacted my business directly to where, I was no longer doing any in-person readings or consultations. I put everything on the phone, email, Zoom. Thank God I was with Zoom about 4 years before Zoom became popular as it is today. But, many of these businesses, I think of some of the businesses even here in Seattle that have closed their doors permanently. Some of these were in business for 100 years, and they had to close their doors permanently, while others others, surfaced and even thrived through, the flexibility of what a pandemic does. Some businesses were forced to pivot to an online ecosystem that they were not familiar with, as retailers had to move inventory online to remain above water. Some restaurants were forced to rely solely on delivery to keep their doors open. I know we ordered a lot of food and that business thrived. I know Amazon thrived because you're no longer going out for a year shopping. In fact, the report I heard was Amazon made this year alone 3 times what they normally make over the last 3 years. So in 1 year, they made 3 times their profit over the last 3 years. That's how this pandemic has transformed. The e-commerce industry has grown at such an expanse rate. It's just unbelievable of how we're moving as a society. And it also established brands gaining incredible growth with newcomers, people that are going online and working in the digital space. They call it the great digital transformation. And then, rather than focus on negative impacts that COVID-19 had to businesses, people and businesses and brands were focusing on how they could be flexibility and learn from what the pandemic caused, both in the many different sectors, whether it was e-commerce or retail, to how they can reach their consumers. Because consumers were always willing to spend money. We are always willing to spend money. And, record sales, it'll be interesting to look back, over the next couple of years, because sometimes it takes time and data to catch up to do the reporting and the analytics of just how much this pandemic impacted us. And, I was thinking Best Buy, they had like a 240% increase during one of their quarters when this pandemic hit. Many people stocked up on electronics, teaching the older generation how to use computers because they had to, where, before I was thinking of my parents, they would be like, oh, that's technology. I don't know how to do it. Well, they had to learn how to do it because that was, part of communicating and being in contact with one another. But even just how we shifted from our unemployment, income, the economy, this has all been impacted. Commerce has shifted heavily online. I don't see us shifting back. I think there's going to be some sort of balance there between online and in person. Social media, literally could launch a brand overnight. I saw where companies literally like TikTok, Instagram, took off based on selling product. Facebook is now selling product. So social media became this platform of having people be able to make money online, something that, necessarily wouldn't have taken place without this pandemic causing people to be able to work from their home. So break. And when we come back, we're going to just continue to talk about how pandemics have changed us, where we're going socially, economically, psychologically. And you are listening to Inspired Living Radio. We'll be back here in 2 minutes.
The cutting edge of conscious radio. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Have you wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
One planet, 7.3 billion people, only one you. Life offers us many opportunities and learning experiences. Are you ready to explore and discover this beautiful planet, the life and energy all around us, the spiritual world, and what is unseen, along with your own personal soul adventure? Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, is the spiritual connection you have been prospecting for. Internationally known as a tested and professional clairvoyant medium and spiritual advisor, Marc's work as a metaphysical teacher, medical instructor, Radio show host, inspirational writer, and hiking guide are here to help you on a journey of self-discovery, healing, inspiration, education, and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. Dare to dream. Dare to explore. Dare to live. For more information on Marc's spiritual practice in Seattle, Washington, please visit marclainhart.com or internet search The Intuitive Prospector.
If I could be you.
And you could be me?
For just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
And welcome back to Inspired Living Radio. Today we are talking about emerging from this global pandemic of COVID-19, the changes in our societal values, human behaviors, and the acceleration and avalanche that is taking place with transformation, who we are as a people, our belief systems, our behaviors, mental health. I was just talking before the break about how the business has shifted, the e-commerce where, many people are online now. Consumers love the it's called the D2C brands with a thriving community. That's the direct to consumer where, like I said, social media became a platform where people were selling stuff online, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and making, some really great money by selling, stuff. So that's been part of the transformations that we've seen taking place as we emerge. As I equate it, the caterpillar requires a season of isolation before it emerges as the butterfly. And for, the last year and a half, I've been doing shows, podcasts, other shows, other interviews where I said that the planet was required to take this isolation break, not just to mitigate COVID-19, but to give a perspective of how the planet changed, how some species actually started to thrive and come back, how without people being in traffic, that some of the pollution that we saw started to decrease. I'm thinking of India where they could see the Himalayas for the first time in 30 years. So then that was only after 30 days of being kind of off grid, where humans were forced to mitigate and isolate inside, and the planet transformed and let us see that's been kind of an amazing observation to me, is to witness the planet's reaction to, when humans are being responsible and good stewards. And, I think that that's going to be a big part of how we move forward in our roaring 20s, realizing that we only have one planet as of we know right now, unless this report that's coming out about UFOs tells us that there's another planet. But like I said, I'm not holding my breath. But, because we're all in this together, and like I said, we have the knowledge of only one planet at this time, there seems to be this newfound freedom to show who we are and the many global challenges we face daily. There will be many that will return to old habits, routines, beliefs, and ways of thinking. That's not to be debated. But we can also expect new and exciting transparency into people's lives, their struggles, their adventures, the pain and the joys regained and experienced through this global crisis together. I talk about a new level of authenticity, awareness, and transformation, along with our dealings with one another, and my prediction that I've talked about during the Roaring 20s of this great coming together. This shift towards authenticity, I'm just kind of thinking about some of the meetings I've been in over the last year where we see people in hoodies, baseball caps, ponytails, makeup-free faces, kids running around in the background, maybe even a few videos where you saw something that you didn't maybe want to see. But that's authenticity. That's seeing us for who we are. And, it's just been interesting that people are no longer hiding their juggle, what it takes to be a parent at home, work, and life balanced, faced by many of you listening to today's show. And, and I've even heard of endless stories of moms finding places in their homes to hide for video conferences, and this is what, if we wouldn't have had this pandemic, this wouldn't have taken place. And because we're all in this together, again, like I said, it just helps us to see this newfound freedom, to show who we really are without the vanity, and to know that we're all struggling together. And also, bringing awareness to mental health. As we've seen as we emerge from this pandemic, we know that we're getting into this new norm, and we know that the vaccinations are working because people are getting back out into society. But with that, we see more cases in hate crimes, violence, gun shootings. I believe we've had more gun shootings to date now in the first 6 months of 2021 than we did all of last year and the year before. So, you can look at some of I look at different poll research sites that follow, everything from suicide rates to gun violence, to see as a kind of a marker what society is doing and how society is responding. I see a lot, videos of people being taken off planes and, just having mental health crisis. And that's something that we're a policing standpoint, how we deal with mental health. And again, mental health was never talked about when I was growing up, and that's something that, depression, anxiety, and how you deal with people that are having a mental health emergency, versus, putting them in handcuffs or putting your, knee on their neck for 9 minutes. These are things that are going to help us to transform and know that these viruses will be all around us, but it's how flexible we are and how we mitigate that and how we move forward. It's just been fun to watch, observe how people have shifted and have changed and have pivoted, I guess, to unlock new opportunities. It's a pandemic has caused the chaos as it has, but like I said, through great chaos, we also become part of awareness to who we are and how we transform. It's kind of like what Albert Einstein talked about: in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And I think opportunity ahead of us, and I would even go, progress takes time. You don't build Rome in a day. And I just saw that we just approved Juneteenth for the end of slavery as a federal holiday, and that's been going on for 2 years. The debates and the arguments and the struggle to have a federal holiday that nationalizes and recognizes the end of a slavery, which this country obviously is still having debates about. Those pains come up because this country was based on slavery, and to have a day recognized is important, but it doesn't happen. That progress doesn't happen overnight. So you have to have patience for things to unfold. The pandemic created an acceleration, transformation, and authenticity to get to these, really start asking what Maslow talked about, those basic psychological needs such as food, drink, shelter, safety needs, or even as Martin Luther King Jr. talked about, life's most persistent and urgent. What are you doing for others? What are you doing for others? When I read that quote, I thought about myself, like, what am I doing for others? And what I am doing for others is, my shows, my podcasts, putting out that vibration, that ripple effect, that positivity, that inspiration to help others in times of, maybe there's a dark time or a grieving time. The readings and consultations I do to help be in service to others in, my belief system of the spirit world or life after death. Not everybody believes in that. And, that's something that's taught me as well. But you have to keep going because misery loves company. And, I'm always going to stand for something versus standing against something. Because at the end of the day, as Ram Dass reminds us, we're all just walking each other home, and death is a certainty for all of us, so we might as well make the best of it. And we can always be kind no matter what is going on in the world. That's the one thing I've learned, is I can always be kind and help others and be patient with my expectations. Like, this needs to get done yesterday, because it usually is not going to happen. Enlightenment is the quiet acceptance of what is, as Dr. Wayne Dyer reminds us. Enlightenment is the quiet acceptance of what is. And this is the what is. This is where we're at. This is as we emerge from this pandemic as the beautiful butterfly. Sometimes that great transformation does require that isolation so we can move into, where we need to go. And again, just going back to Einstein, in the middle of difficulty lies great opportunity. So just kind of looking at, just some of the authenticity of, how we're accepting of people, how we're seeing of people through, whether it's a Zoom platform, we start to get back into meeting people in person. I think some of the big shifts we're going to see is people self-worth of what they're paid to work. I think that's going to be a big on our businesses and what companies are paying their employees. And as far as and I'm not saying you need to pay everybody, it'd be nice, but, fair so that they can survive, so they can meet Maslow's basic foundations of survival of, and have payment where, being paid where somebody doesn't have to work just to put a meal on the table for their children, right? And this includes our veterans. You guys. Veterans, I was a veteran for 8 years. I know how much. I remember getting paid the first few pay of housing assistance. I don't know how my wife and I would have survived, but we've changed, and we know that we're creatures of habit, and we know when we change our habits, then that's when things start to change, and that rapid avalanche effect that I talked about. It's there was an interesting article from Time. I read it, and when I was researching, putting the content together for the show, this Time article kind of stood out to me, and it talked about your pandemic habits may fade away, but the strength and wisdom you gained won't. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I was like, right, you began to, how long has it been since I've worn pants? I've been in sweatpants or shorts for 16 months. And wait, I got to go out. I actually have to go out into public and do some adulting and wear pants up. And went to a wedding for the first time in over a year. Some family and friends, and it's been a long time. And I actually didn't wear pants. I actually wore shorts because it was very laid back. But, your habits are going to start to fade away as we emerge from this pandemic, and we're getting to this new normal. But what you gained in strength and wisdom and flexibility, these are the things that you're going to look back at. Great pandemic. I learned how to, do some stuff that maybe I didn't necessarily be forced to do without that. Our teachers, I think about our parents, I think about our frontline workers, our nurses, our doctors, our postal carriers, our railroad workers, our grocery store clerks, everybody that was on the front lines to keep society going is important, and we need to pay them accordingly so we can have a balance. Because just like the virus ran rapid is because we as a species are out of balance with the planet, with each other, and sometimes you need to go through this pain to have balance and bring forth awareness to work towards the progression of balance. Or as Rumi reminds us, the 12th century mystic and poet, the cure for the pain is the pain. So there's going to be some interesting conversations as we move forward, like I said, from universal health care, pay for retributions, universal pay for maybe a global income, monthly income. They're all going to be conversations, and there's going to be some big fights at the political level and at the presidential level over the next 4 years, over the next years. This roaring 20s is going to be not an easy roaring 20s. It's not going to be all kumbaya and cupcakes and kitty cats and rainbows. There's going to be some real trying moments in our decade. But again, it's through, that's what democracy is. That's what, you have a voice of a majority and a voice of a minority to work for the common good for everybody as we, the people. And that's going to include the rest of the globe, because the globe realizes not just happening in America. This COVID-19 went all around the globe and will be with us until there's an actual cure. But like I said earlier in the show, most of our diseases out there don't have cures. It's about how we mitigate and how we move around through flexibility to find ways to beat COVID or survive COVID, and then start working together so this doesn't happen again. And I think the business community is going to realize that we can't have this happen again, because there was just so much uncertainty. And, as you move to this time of reset, you'll find that, successful organizations are tapping into the shifts in behavior, not only to improve their consumer relevance and differentiate themselves from the competition, but realizing that people have changed and you need to meet people where they're at. And that's something also that I've learned from this, is meet people where at, and caring and compassionate at the end of the day, even when we have, disagreements. But I'll just leave you with this. We will not return to normal because normal was the problem in the first place. Pre-pandemic, and as we emerge from the caterpillar through the last 16 months of isolation, or what I call the cocoon phase, we know within the cocoon the great struggle sharpens the wings. And as we slowly and finally emerge from this pandemic as beautiful butterflies, there's a new normal that awaits us. I'm inspired, I'm encouraged, I'm motivated. I'll be right there with you along the way for as long as I can to help us thrive and excel and to really meet the challenges ahead of us as we go through this roaring 20s of ours and as we emerge from this great pandemic. So I'll just wrap up with what I said earlier. Life's most persistent, urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And that comes from the great Martin Luther King Jr. So thanks for listening in today. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay inspired, stay encouraged. Most importantly, until our next soul adventure together, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover that diamond within. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Namaste.